All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, the 23rd of July, 2025, and this is the Cluster API office hours. Cluster API is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which can basically be summarized as please treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so, please be kind to each other. And if you'd like to ask a question or talk, please raise your hand and I will call on you. So at the beginning of our meetings, we like to give new attendees a chance to say hello to the community or introduce themselves or, just kind of tell us what you're interested in Cluster API about. So I will be quiet for a few seconds here. And if you feel like you'd like to say hello to everybody, please unmute and do so. All right.
Hi, I am Venkata. So this is my first time attending this CAPI Upstream meeting. I'm very much interested in knowing what's happening in this, so happy to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Welcome, Venkata. All right, we will move on to our open proposal readouts, unless anyone else would like to say hello. Okay, moving on then. So we'll look at the open proposals here. Update auto scaling from 0. I think this enhancement, has it merged yet, or it's very close to merging? Okay, so I think we can take this proposal off the list now. Is that the way this works? Someone want to help me out here? Or should we leave
Yeah,
it here for the time being?
no. That's the way it should work.
Okay. Yay,
I,
we
th I think
removed.
also, sorry, I think also there's no implementation in core copy for this, right? Basically, it's now just for autoscaler to implement and for infra providers that
I
want to use
believe
it.
so. Yeah, I believe this is specifically for infra providers at this point. Let's see here. Let's view the file. Yeah, so I think the changes that are being added are related to the node info that's going into the machine. Let's see if I can
Yep.
find.
Yeah, that should be the infra provider part. And
Yeah,
the other part is that the autoscaler actually handles it.
right, exactly. So providers need to be aware that if they would like to satisfy this part of the opt-in, scale from 0 stuff, they'll need to fill this part out. And then there is also a corresponding, I think we also added a corresponding override annotation for that as well. But that may be documented on the cluster autoscaler side at this point. Anyways, yeah. So yeah, no implementation details there for cluster API at least. So the next one is propagating taints from the machine template down to the nodes. I know Nolan had been looking at this. Is anyone here who wants to give an update around this or could? No, there'd been some activity here. Okay, looks like maybe we're still just waiting for comments here. And then chained and efficient upgrades for clusters with managed topologies. Fabrizio, did you want to give any comment on this one?
Yeah, as we discussed a couple of times, the proposal looks good. There are no, we had already a couple, 2 rounds of feedback. All are addressed. So the plan still is, I showed a demo. I have a PR in flight, ready to be pushed. So the plan is, as soon as main branch is forked for the new release, so it's open for the new release. We are going to make a final pass on the proposal, merge it, open the PR with the first part of the implementation. So yeah, we're ready to make progress basically. And
Awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
no, I think that this was discussed also 1 or 2 weeks ago when I was not here in the meeting. So I think yeah.
Well, yeah, exciting exciting to see that move forward. And, yeah, not too much to do. Just all the V1 beta 2 updates, add in this chain, yeah, just a little bit of light changes to cluster API, right? Okay. So that's our open proposal readouts. Thank you. And we'll go into discussion topics. So I don't know who added this one. Maybe Matt, Cappy
Yeah.
V1.11 beta. Please take it away.
Yeah, I added it, but I just helped do the release. So, I mean, maybe a maintainer wants to talk about the actual content. There was a fair amount of change between the last beta, and we will do another beta next week.
All right, great. Does anyone else want to add comments about this one or just follow the release notes as normal? Yeah, Stefan, please.
I can say a few words. Yeah, definitely follow the release notes. Definitely please try to bump and test. Otherwise, yeah, we're really trying to get this done. It's a ton of work. The list is getting shorter. Still too long. No, but so code freeze is essentially yesterday in 2 weeks, I think. And I think we should be. So my current impression, we should be really fine within like the next week or the week and a half or something. So my personal goal would be like next week Friday, because someone goes on PTO. It's not me, but I want to have that stuff done before. So yeah, I think we're still on track to make that happen. Yeah, and while saying thanks for everyone who's contributing there, also especially to everyone working on the Cube API linter. That's going really well. Also, it's good that we have basically a second repository where, at least for B2Me, don't have to review stuff, but we're still getting a lot of benefit out of it. Yep, that's it.
Cool. That's good to hear. And yeah, like amazing amount of work that's going on around this release and everything. So yeah, thank you to everyone who's kind of like, putting your back into this one. I know that the API updates are not easy. And Matt, just as a TLDR, real world code freeze is a week from Friday. Alrighty. Stefan, you've got the next one up here about heads up on the kube ADM changes. So please take it away.
Yeah, so I don't know who's aware of this, but it seems like, no, let me phrase this another way. So basically, core Kubernetes, including kubeadm, is testing against a specific etcd version, and that is the version that's actually supported. So basically, if you look into like kubeadm, some constants.go file, every single kubeadm version has a map which corresponding etcd versions are supported for which Kubernetes version. So the other way around, kubeadm 1.34 supports a certain etcd version for 134, a certain etcd version for 133, a certain etcd version for 132, etc. Those versions can change over time. They can change in patch releases, etc. In general, I think in the past, while they only tested like a one-to-one mapping, essentially between one-to-one-to-one mapping between kubeadm, Kubernetes, and etcd, it also generally worked in other combinations. It's just they weren't testing it because they cannot test like every combination of everything. But what happened this time around is that basically there was a PR merged in core Kubernetes, which was starting to rely on, hey, we only support etcd 3.6 by essentially setting different command line flags on the etcd pod. And the impact of that was that if you tried to create a Kubernetes 134 beta something cluster with kubeadm and with the wrong etcd version, then etcd was not coming up because etcd did not know about the command line flags. So what we now learned, or I personally learned, is like, okay, hey, there's like this mapping and we should sort of stick to that mapping. And otherwise things just might not work because they're not tested, they're not supported, nothing. Okay, so I think this is also what I wrote here. And by the way, this is, I mean, I'm also supposed to write some release notes the next few weeks. So that's like my starting point. We're going to add more and more and more that we can have in our copy release notes. But yeah, so this note here specifically says like, okay, and of course it's only relevant if you use kubeadm, but of course the KCP control plane provider and the bootstrap provider, they are using kubeadm. So we were affected by that and our tests were failing because of what I just explained. So yeah, but just to go through it systematically. So basically if you use KCP, there's a certain kubeadm to etcd compatibility. kubeadm 134 supports. So I think the patch versions really doesn't matter. So that's why I omitted it here. But kubeadm 134 supports etcd 3.6 for Kubernetes 134. kubeadm 133 supports 3.5 for 133. And there's like an additional special thing this time around for etcd. Basically, they had issues in etcd, which means that if you upgrade from etcd 3.5 to 3.6, then you should have at least etcd 3.5.20 and not an older version of that. Otherwise, I think there's something like learner mode, member promotion. Read the document, the linked document if you're interested about details. So, but what it essentially comes down to is that if you use KZP or other stuff that is using kubeadm, and some of that also applies if you just use etcd, you should make sure that if you have 133 class and want to upgrade to 134, that essentially before the upgrade, you use at least etcd 3.5.20. And the moment you trigger an upgrade to 134, you should also switch to etcd 3.6. Otherwise, bad things might happen. They merged an additional PR in Kubernetes / kubeadm, which basically made this flag thingy slightly smarter and more flexible. So the issue that we hit that doesn't exist anymore with the next beta version of Kubernetes. But it doesn't change the fact that the official supported version of etcd with 134 will be 3.6, and you should use that version and nothing else. Otherwise, like, you don't know where it fades in which way. You might not even notice, and right. So what I was trying to do here is essentially just official heads up. Please be aware of this compatibility thingy and try to use the right versions if you are using KCP. Yeah, and we're going to put it in our release notes eventually for like the GA release, either the GA release or maybe even just the 1.11.1 release, because that will be the one that officially supports Kubernetes 134 in cluster API, because that's after GA. Yeah, Fabrizio, you were part of those discussions. Did I miss something important? Did you notice something? Probably I covered most of it.
No, I think it is correct. So etcd compatibility between kubeadmin and etcd, and the constraint if you want to upgrade through 3.5 to 3.6. Those are the main things.
Yeah, and that post should summarize it, how that compatibility exactly looks like.
And just for clarity's sake, because I realize this is kind of complicated, and this is for people who are looking towards kind of like the future here, what's coming.
Yeah.
Cluster API 1.11, will that be based on Kubernetes 1.34, or is it based on 1.33?
So the thing where this comes into play is not really cluster API even in that sense.
Right. It's if I'm upgrading Kubernetes, right?
Yeah, and also what kubeadm binaries you're using.
Right.
But like that's where I like to.
Yeah, I guess what I'm getting to is like,
yeah.
if I'm a cluster API user and I'm using kubeadm and I'm looking to upgrade my cluster from 133 to 134, I need to be aware of this etcd upgrade before I start doing all this stuff.
Yeah, otherwise you might run into weird issues.
Well, the reason I was asking about cluster API versions, because I was just wondering, like, is installing a 1.34 Kubernetes, is that going to be associated with installing 1.11 cluster API? I know they're orthogonal, but are they going to be like the defaults,
Okay, so there is no default, essentially. When you create a cluster, I mean, it depends if you use cluster class or not, or if you create machine deployments and stuff manually, if you don't use cluster class. But if I remember correctly, even in all of the modes that we support, you always have to specify a version somewhere.
Right. But if I'm using cluster API 1.11 and I'm going to Kubernetes 1.34, that's like I'm really on the cutting edge trying to adopt the new Kubernetes. Yeah.
So basically where specific Kubernetes support comes into play with cluster API is that essentially a new cluster API version tests the compatibility with a new Kubernetes version, and sometimes we have to make changes in KAPI to support a new version. A lot of times we don't have to make any changes, but essentially if you look at 1.10, we never tested 1.10 against 134, and we're never going to test it against 110 against 134. So we're going to start, we're already testing it. We're already testing the main branch for a while against 134, but we're not going to put 134 support into 1.10. So what we're currently testing is copy main against essentially Kubernetes main or 134, depends on how you look at it. And then once we cut 111.1, we officially support it with a sense of like, okay, if someone complains about it, we fix it. And we have test coverage also going forward that 111.1 plus works against Kubernetes 134. Based on what we know today, 134 should also work with 1.10. And the compatibility issue that I just mentioned, that is mostly introduced by kubeadm and etcd. And the way that basically you get from whatever you do in cluster API to you use a specific kubeadm or etcd version is basically that usually people are baking in a certain kubeadm version into a certain OS image version. So a lot of providers are using, hey, you have a Kubernetes 134 operating system image, and there is kubeadm 134 in there. So that's how you get to a certain kubeadm version. And then etcd, the way it works with KCP is that if you create a new cluster, let's say you create a 134 cluster and use all this kubeadm stuff, right? So there's basically kubeadm init running on the very first control plane machine. kubeadm init has a hard-coded default version of etcd. So that's what you're going to end up with. And that version will be 3.6. So if you create a new cluster with 134 with kubeadm, you will get etcd 3.6. The way you can control this is in KCP, you can override the etcd version that should be used. So there's a field on the KCP object where you say, I want to have etcd 3527 or whatever. And then we're going to use that one instead. Otherwise, on init, you get whatever the default of kubeadm is. And on upgrades, we don't touch it, except if you set on the KCP object that you want to use a specific version. Otherwise, this version will always stay the same. Which is also not necessarily good, right? Because as I was just saying, like if you create a cluster with, let's say 133, you create a 133 cluster with 3.20, and then you don't set a version anywhere, then you will just stay on 3.520. Future kubeadm versions might not be compatible in any way with 3.520, but nobody will bump that CD version if you do not set that version on the KCP object. Might work entirely different with other control plane providers, of course. But yeah, that's like the sort of baked-in story that we have.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Appreciate the in-depth explanation. And Fabrizio, thank you for the link. I think this helps, kind of seeing what's compatible. But like, yeah, just for clarity's sake, this is all about upgrading when you're using kubeadm and you're going from 1.33 kube to 1.34 kube. The cluster API part is kind of less interesting. The more interesting part is using kubeadm and trying to do this upgrade. Okay, does anybody else have questions about that? I know it was kind of confusing for me. Okay, I'm not seeing hands going up, so we'll move on to the next topic. Igor, you have a draft document with an initial proposal to discuss, so please.
Yeah, we've discussed this in the last few calls. It's for allowing users to manage their machine deployment versions separate from the global cluster topology version. And there were like concerns about edge cases and stuff. The like basically, at least in like the draft implementation and what the doc talks about is basically if you set this version, like you're just opting out of like the managed version upgrades. So as the controller, does its, managed rolling upgrade through everything, it just completely ignores that machine deployment. And I think that helps with a lot of the edge cases there. And in the document, one thing that would be an interesting edge case is what if you're on a different version, you go back in, you remove the version flag, and you go back to the managed. How would that work? So I'm proposing we just kind of make it not immutable, but you either have to set the version when you create a worker topology. Like you can't, like if you're using the version, you can't later remove it and go back to the auto version upgrades, because that's where things would get really messy. But if you just create a worker topology, set the version, then you're just never part of the managed upgrades.
Okay. Do people have questions about this? Okay, I'm not seeing hands going up. Oh, Fabrizio, please.
Just a quick question. So, as discussed last time, at the end of the meeting, I've wrote down notes about the discussion that we had last week. Please take a look if they are good. Okay, and thanks for the document. I will try to take a look when work for V1 Beta 2 is gone and I got the other proposal merged.
Sure. Yeah, and I figured folks would be busy with V1 Beta 2 and code freeze, so I can come back and bother everyone in a couple weeks.
Did you have a link to those notes, Fabrizio, or was that the document we were just looking at?
If you just scroll down a little bit, so there is the point from Igor. I basically added all the notes below this point. If you want, I can highlight it. Yeah, that's
That's
fine.
okay.
Basically.
Yeah, I'll just drop a bookmark to it so people know when they're reading this to look.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yep. Okay, Joe, you've got your hand up as well, please.
Please. Fabrizio, if you have a list of specific things you would like us to test, I'd love to have that.
Yeah, the point is, as we tried to
I
explain
know,
last time.
I know it's all super complicated. If you had a specific list though that we could start with, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, what I have is, the document I mentioned that I'm going to share. The problem is it's not just clicking the share button. It's like I have to rewrite some parts of it because it was basically a doc written for like an internal, also like downstream perspective. It's more than just about upstream copy. That's why it's not just pop and you have it. But I think this will give some angles for that point, like what we currently have, and then from that I think we can infer what you want to test. I mean, it's sort of related. It's not exactly the same.
Yeah, I think that the evil is in detail, and you are right. Oh, this PR just work for most of the happy parts. The problem is to figure it out also the non-happy parts. That's the tricky part. It requires some thinking. The one that comes to my mind is I basically detach a machine deployment from version management, and then what happens if the user just forgot to update this cluster?
I mean, then that's the user's fault, right? It'll be behind a feature gate.
That's the key point. So in cluster API, topology and manage cluster class is sort of, the autopilot experience. We should not add foot guns into cluster class. Otherwise, we are sort of failing the reason why we create all this complexity. So
Yeah,
if you want manage your stuff, just do not use cluster class. If you want to use cluster class should help you.
Yeah, and exactly. We want to use it and it does help us, but we just want to manage our upgrades in a different manner. So I'm happy to figure out like how we can, put this behind certain like feature gates and flags, like experimental or something like that.
And I think what you're saying is that it would be good if you don't just have like, the current mode and then feature gate the other mode and everything is unsafe. But that still, even the other mode has certain safeguards in place, right? I'm not saying it should still manage the versions. I just say like, okay, if I have, sorry, I have just one question about how does this work. So we were saying you want to have version fields for the machine deployment. Where does the control plane version come from? Is that still cluster spec topology version? Or would you add a different version field for control plane as well to pin that one too?
I mean, that's an implementation detail. I was thinking that cluster spec topology would then just be the control plane version. And back to the previous point, like if a user forgets to upgrade, There's like a bunch of pre-flight checks, and one is that the version exactly matches, right? So in this mode, we just remove that, but the pre-flight check for like Cube ADM compatibility and like that it's supported skew is still there.
Yeah, and I think what you're trying to say is basically it would be good that the safeguards that still apply are actually still working, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah, of course.
obviously, I don't know details of your PR or what you're proposing at the moment in that doc. It's just, I think, of course, for the things that we want to explicitly override, it doesn't make sense to have those checks anymore. But for the other cases that still make sense, like, I don't know, your control plane version should not be 10 versions ahead of a machine deployment or something like that. And you probably should also not be able to set minor versions like that, that would actually happen. Just that this sort of stuff basically is still active, even in the pin mode. I think that's where we're coming from. But I think it's, for example, definitely a good limitation that we sounded like it, that we don't want to support, like, let's say, arbitrary transitions between what we currently have and pinning and then go back and forth. And, because that obviously makes it very complicated. Another limitation that could work in a similar way is, so today in the cluster webhook, we essentially say you can only change the version field if the entire cluster is on the same version, right? Because we say, like, you only should trigger one upgrade at a time. I think there's also a version of this that could also work with the pin mode, where you basically say, I mean, ideally going forward, we would also allow just moving the version and everything still works, but it's also complicated to make that work, right? So in a pin mode, it could also be essentially, okay, if I pin the machine deployment to a specific version, then I want to make sure that this version is rolled out first before someone changes the machine deployment version again to something else, which would also sort of limit the space of possible stuff that can happen. And I think we just have to figure that out. Like, what sort of safety do we want to have there? And just that from a very high level point of view, it's not just, okay, you start pinning and then there is no safety anymore.
Yeah.
Not that anyone said that, but I think that's just very coming from it. We just don't want that.
Yeah, of course. Fabrizio?
Yeah, sort of adding on this. So I don't think that, as soon as we have a field in the PI, a feature flag, the user are going to use it. So we should be consistent, basically. We should have a certain threshold of consistency that prevents users, because a feature flag works well for stuff that are not visible for the users. But the users see a field in API and use it, and it doesn't see the feature flag that are set on the controller manifest. And
Yeah,
so,
I'm happy to like the PR is just like a very draft, just POC, right? That's obviously not going to be like the real implementation. I'm super happy to, figure out however we want to implement this correctly, and whatever works for everyone. But we just need this capability, like in, the way we get that in, we're happy to, find whatever everyone's comfortable with, but we just need the capability.
yeah, I think that a way to get there is you want to add this capability, and then basically what you have to do is to play the what if game. What if this happen? What if this happen? What if this happen? And unfortunately, there is a huge permutation, because honestly, and this requires research and investing time. So if your expectation, just to be, I think it won't be sustainable that you throw out a proposal and then you expect that the maintainers comes back with the entire what if case. It should be addressed by the proposal itself, because otherwise it will be painful for you and for me and for us as a maintainer, because we got a proposal and then we have to find time to do the research, and we don't have so much bandwidth. And so it will be painful for you that we have to wait a lot. It will be painful for us that we have to give feedback, and then there will be a misunderstanding, because basically we are talking about stuff that you are not looking into it. So This is what,
Yeah.
at least what we usually do is that, okay, we add a field. Okay, what happens if something else around this field changes? What happens if someone, we pin a machine deployment and someone bump the version? And all that the use case that basically can play around. And what happens if we use kubadmin? What happens if we are not using kubadmin? What happens for machine pool, because there are also machines that pool in the game. What happens for the contract? So I know that it is a lot, but this is what it is. Cluster class is autopilot, and it should basically figure it out, all the use case, and take care for the users. And
Yeah, and just to be clear, I wasn't asking for that. All I was hoping for was maybe some advice from somebody who's been through this in depth. So if you had some quick advice, off the top of the head advice, that's all I was hoping for.
Sounds good. Yeah, I think we had some. I added some points in the chat. Just the sort of thing we were looking at the last time, like the sort of changes that can happen. I don't know, by the user, by autoscaler, by machines becoming unhealthy, machine of check controller triggering. And what the exercise we did last time was essentially writing up like, I mean, you don't have to write it up because that's what I'm going to give you. But we essentially wrote up, okay, the cluster webhook is validating exactly this thing. The KCB controller is doing this sort of pre-flight checking here and there. The machine set controller is doing this thing. The machine deployment, blah, blah, all of this. And then we were trying to think like through all the things that could be done and if all of those cases are safe or not, right? What if we are in the middle of an upgrade and then this thing triggers, or of course also combinations of this stuff. Yeah. I mean, and what we ended up with at the moment is that we are basically limited a lot, right? We're saying like, okay, you can only trigger one upgrade at a time. And then while that upgrade is going on, and when it's not safe, basically we say, okay, if any of our controllers would create a new machine and we know that this new machine can potentially not work because of skew stuff, then we block. We block machine creations on scale up. We block machine for remediation, we block machine deletion because we know that the machine creation afterwards would not work. So rather you have an unhealthy machine than no machine at all. I'm not entirely sure where we ended up with rolling update. If it went well, we are also blocking delete machine before create machine if you have like max search of 0 and max unavailable of 1. But I'm not sure if that's what he did or not. But yeah, sorry, just random context.
Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, we're definitely prepared to, like, we really need this, and we're prepared to invest in, thinking through it, going through the edge cases and all of that.
Okay. Yeah, good discussion here. Igor, yeah, I'm hoping like, did some of what Stefan and Fabrizio is talking about, does that give you some next steps here that you feel are actionable?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. Yeah, just because like I think, yeah, the important thing is here is like this feature sounds like it's interesting, but there are some externalities and kind of some, edge cases and whatnot. We want to make sure not to break, kind of I think what Fabrizio was talking about with, kind of the cluster class being the easy mode and whatnot. So anyways, I just wanted to make sure that, yeah, you had some good actionable takeaways from this. Cool. Does anybody else have questions or comments about this topic? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands going up, so we will go on to the next topic, which is from me. There is currently some brokenness in the cluster autoscaler when using V1 beta 2 and scaling from 0. And if I understand what Stefan was saying to me in chat, this is around when the cluster autoscaler tries to find the infrastructure machine template from the reference that exists in a machine deployment or a machine set that previously we gave the version, and in the new object reference, we no longer give the version. And so we have to pick, a version when we're going to get it. And it's possible that a management cluster might contain two different versions of the infrastructure machine template. Do I have that correct, Stefan?
Yes. I mean, I think maybe just first of all, we have two separate issues, but let's start talking about this one. I don't know if you also want to talk about the other one.
Oh, well, I think we
Uh,
better, because if I
yeah,
forgot about the other one, I
yeah,
want to make sure I
yeah.
don't.
And this one is from zero, and the other one is sorry. Yeah, this is from zero, the other one is to zero.
Okay. Oh, right,
So
right.
this one is about the machine deployment or whatever is at zero, and can we scale back up again? And the other one is getting down to zero.
Right.
Okay, but yeah, it's just saying on this one, yes, basically that's what it is. And I think my last comment or something summarizes what I would suggest on how we should handle it.
So I just want to make sure, like,
Yeah.
when you're using
But
the preferred version in the client, I'm not passing a version. I'm just telling it to give me whatever the highest version number it has is, basically, and that's the preferred version that comes back to me.
that's as far as I know. So the problem is preferred version is something coming out of the API server, and
Right.
I never read up on like how the API server is deciding that.
Okay.
My current assumption is that it probably, I mean, either it's the very latest version or it's the latest stable version or something like that. So if you
Right.
have like, let's say a V1 and a V1.2 Alpha 1, I would hope it gives you the V1, but I don't know.
Right. You'd think, right? But
I
that's
don't know.
but so
But I
basically,
think we
yeah,
can
go
figure
ahead.
that out. I think we can figure that out if we have to. For the current problem, it's fine. I think because I think we do know that. I guess in the past we know that we probably got V1 beta 1 instead of alpha stuff, and we definitely do know that if you have beta 1 and beta 2, that preferred version is beta 2. So I think probably this is more like a question for if you have other API versions apart from beta 1 and beta 2. I think even going to V1 is still should be sane that is the preferred version. I just don't know what happens.
Right.
I really don't know what happens afterwards.
Right. So in the code for this, what we need to do is we need to, like, you know, this is
Yeah.
in this code where we try to read the infrastructure reference, we're going to need to, like, discriminate what type of reference it is. We can't just use the reference the way that it was before, because the fields have changed.
Yeah.
And I think
Exactly.
API version is gone now, right? So
Yes, exactly.
we'll have to put some conditional logic in here to pick the right one. And then
Yeah.
we may also need to expose some way for the user to indicate what the preferred version is, if, like, do we even want to go down that route? Or I see Fabrizio.
I think we don't have to, but I don't know what might be different in OpenShift maybe, so maybe you want to. So what I do know is basically if I only look at what I know, right? We have two places where this preferred version thing happens. The first thing is which version of a machine deployment are we getting? This is the first place where we do preferred version. And that's where we pick up a beta 2 machine deployment instead of beta 1 machine deployment. So that's the first place we hit this.
Right.
Okay, and you were talking about a second place, which is basically, now we're looking at the machine deployment, and we have a template spec infrastructure ref, and depending on if this is beta 2 or if it is older, the infrastructure ref will look different. For beta 1 or older, you have all the fields that you're currently checking, and it's just fine. For beta 2 and above, you don't have API version anymore, and instead of that, you have API group, which is what you were just saying, like, okay, the version part is now missing, and the question is, which version of the infra machine template are we getting? And yes, what I would do then is basically say, okay, let's just pick the latest, because I make one or two assumptions there, maybe just one. I think we should probably continue evolving the autoscaler infra machine template contract in a way that we're only going to keep adding optional fields, right? And not just start, okay, capacity is now gone and has a different name. So the way the autoscaler is currently handling all the stuff, it just tries to look up fields, and if they're there, it uses it, and if not, it's not using them. It's not failing or something. And I think if we keep doing it this way, basically the autoscaler contract today has a bunch of optional fields, and in the future it will have a bunch of more optional fields. And as long as we do that, it should always be safe to just pick the latest API version of the infra machine template, and this will just have like the maximum amount of the optional fields that you can imagine.
Yeah. That
It
makes
just becomes more tricky if you want to rename stuff or if you want to add a required field, because then we have to be really sure. The nice thing about the way it currently works is that it's basically very forward compatible, right?
Right.
I mean, the thing what happens with the infraref was not, but I assume we made this change now once, and we're not going to change the ref format going forward. So
Right.
once we have the ref format handling for beta 1 and below and beta 2 and above, I assume I would say this should stay stable forever, but okay.
Right. But like,
Don't-
yeah, like
don't
essentially
depend on me.
like
Yeah.
if we don't have API version, but we do have API group, like we
Yeah.
know which one we're dealing with and we can just
Yeah, exactly.
easily kind of fill it in and keep
And
going.
I think we should really not touch that again and also drop API group or something. I mean, nobody can guarantee that, but I would
Right,
hope it
right,
stays that
for
way
sure.
forever. Yeah, and as long as it stays, basically it's forward compatible, right? You don't really have to worry about this is like beta 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. It should just always work.
Right.
And if we handle it that way, so basically if you would have a hard-coded pinning, like beta 1 is this, beta 2 is this, then as soon as beta 3 comes along, you have to implement beta 3 specifically, and you have to backport to all old versions so that old autoscalers are not breaking. But a nice thing about that currently works, it will just also work future versions as long as we stick to the ref format is not changing, and the autoscaler contract only has optional stuff. As long as that's the case, we will be compatible with all future versions of everything. And I think that's like a nice property. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
maybe it's not, I don't know, 100% safe, but my feeling is that we probably can make those assumptions with the autoscaler and we will be fine.
Right. I think probably we need to build out the end test too to kind of like so we can demonstrate some of this in the unit
Yeah.
testing.
What you could definitely still do if you want to, I mean, for the version, so the place where we get the machine deployment, just for context for everyone. So basically, currently we say like, what is the preferred version of machine deployment? Then we get an answer from the API server, and then we do a get on v1 beta 1 or beta 2 of the machine deployment, right? But there is also already an environment variable where you can say, I want to use alpha 1, 3, 4, 5, whatever you have,
Right.
and take that one. And if you want, and I don't know if it makes sense, but potentially you could consider doing the same for the infra machine template version. I just don't know if it gets tricky if one instance of an autoscaler is supposed to be compatible with different infra providers, because then you may need more end variables than just one. But I don't know if that's a use case for autoscaler or not, because I know that autoscaler is usually running on the workload cluster, and that workload cluster is just on one infrastructure, then it's fine. But I think the other mode is also supported where it runs in the management cluster. And I guess in that scenario, it could be that you have, I don't know, an AWS cluster and an Azure cluster. And then you would probably need more than one end variable if you want
Right.
to also be able to pin the version of the information.
Right. I guess that would be the question, right? Like this CAPI version here is like an environment variable that the user could say like v1 beta 1 or v1 beta 2 or something. In the future, if we wanted to change that other piece of code, so that it's pulling the right, so that it's getting a different version of that. And I've lost contact with it now. But yeah, like if we wanted to change it where we would actually want to inject the version here from the environment variable. I don't even know if we need to do that or not, but yeah,
but not from this one, because I think this copy version should be really the version of core cluster API.
Right.
And the other version is from the infra provider.
Right. If you wanted,
okay.
we would have to add a separate environment variable for like the infra version or something.
Exactly.
If it turns out that users need that. Let's hope they don't, but you know.
Yeah, and potentially even not just one, but basically one per infra provider, so that you can support more than one infra. No, I'm just saying, like, right?
No,
if
you're right.
If it's use case for autoscaler to run with two infra providers in the same management cluster, then you
you're absolutely right. Yeah. Okay, we'll have to hear from users, I think, a little more on that. But yeah, I appreciate it.
But I mean,
yeah, go ahead.
Last one from my side. But as far as I'm aware, we would not need this pinning of the infra provider version. I don't know any use case there. Maybe other people.
Right, totally. I don't know either. Like, I'm gonna hope that like we don't need to do that. And Fabrizio, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Did Stefan cover what you were talking about? Or?
Yes, I think that I also commented on the issue. What Stefan is proposing is a simple and effective fix.
Yeah.
Of course, then we can make it smarter, more fancy, and whatever. But this is basically fixing the issue. And yeah, if you want to pair or have a deep dive code pairing session, let us know.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I wanted to say for people here and for people who might be watching on the recording as well, if anyone is curious to get involved with this issue and would like to do some work on the autoscaler, please reach out to me on the Kubernetes Slack. I'd be happy to help anyone who wants to kind of get in this and make some changes. It's not super complicated, but it would be a great way to start contributing to the autoscaler and cluster API if anyone's interested. So just leaving that offer out there for anyone who might want it. Okay, any other questions or comments about this issue?
Should we talk about the other issue?
Oh yeah, that's right. The other
Oh,
issue.
yes, almost forgot it.
Okay. So this is for scale from 0.
Exactly. The other one is about scale to 0. Stefan, if you want, I give you a quick overview.
Maybe you take that one.
Yeah. So the issue is the following. In Autoscaler 133, APR merged and is changing how the autoscaler is updating the scalable resources. So before it was calling update, and now it is calling patch. Okay. Turns out that the patch that is being generated using a core type that basically has an omit empty on the replica fields. So when you try to generate a patch with a replica field to 0, omit empty kicks in, and so you are never scaling down to 0. That's the point. So we tried, we played a little bit. Stefan played a little bit, and looks like upgrade is still working. I don't know why it was changed, but yeah, with the current change in 133, is not possible to scale to 0 due to this serialization issue. Maybe we can keep using patch by using a custom object without omit empty. Maybe we can roll back to use update. But yeah, currently you cannot scale to 0, basically, with Autoscaler 133. I hope this is good enough, Mike. Otherwise,
it absolutely makes sense. And yeah, I guess like it's just like when we set it to 0, that looks like the 0 value, and so it doesn't serialize it, is what's happening.
Exactly. You send a patch where basically there is no replica 0, and so the scalable resource is not changing. Stefan?
Yeah, the fun thing is that the same happens for patch and update. So if you look with debugger into the patch request to send or the update request to send, in both cases you will see an empty spec with nothing in there. Just apparently the update is implemented on server side in a way. It probably unmarshes the scale thingy and then spec because it's 0, because it's like the 0 value, and then just works. While patch apparently works in a way that an empty spec means no patch.
Right, yeah. Like I could totally see like patch, if patch is doing something on the client side where it's like invalidating 0 values and just not even serializing them, then like, yeah, the server never knows about it. I haven't looked at the wire protocol to see like what's actually happening there.
Yeah,
but I can test that.
we definitely we took a look. We debugged into like the client in there, and we saw that after Marshall, in both cases, you have an empty spec.
Wow.
I assume just that the server side and API server is different for the update call.
And then this is related, like because we have omit empty on the type, that allows us to actually put a 0. Now here, like, yeah, that's like
because you have omit empty, the 0 is not showing up after marshalling.
Right, exactly. How did we?
And this is a core V1 type.
Right.
It's a scaling V1, but
a
scaling V1. Sorry,
okay.
Yeah.
So this is actually the scale sub-resource is marshaling this way, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm not sure how the exact wording is. So this is actually sent to the scale sub-resource endpoint. And if you look at it from a goal level, it's like scaling v1 dot scale is like the struct that is used.
I want to check like our like Red Hat's testing too, because we have CI that's running scale to and from zero tests on this stuff, and I haven't seen the failure rates go high, or maybe I have missed the failure rates going high, because I would expect that our tests for this should be failing consistently, unless things work a little bit differently for the way we do it. But I'll investigate that as well.
Yeah. So we definitely have confirmation that it happens with CapV, but I mean, I was literally in the autoscaler code, so with debugger. So this should happen everywhere if that commit is included. And the test coverage actually tests it, right?
Yeah.
What we're also trying to do as a follow-up is I think there are two reasons why we didn't find it earlier. On the copy side, right? I mean, ideally you find this on the autoscaler side. But there are
Right.
two reasons why we didn't find it earlier on the autoscaler side. One reason was that we bumped the autoscaler version relatively late in CapV to 133. And the other reason is that we do not have coverage for that in core copy. But there's a help wanted issue and someone volunteered to essentially extend CapD so that we can also test autoscale from and to 0 in CapD.
Okay.
Essentially, we have to implement infra-machine template status memory thingy or something, just something like that, and then it should work. But that's not there yet.
So just so I
Looks like we have a
understand
good
this,
path there.
the
Yep.
temporary fix is to go back to using update and not use patch, right? That allows us to keep
That would
working.
that would definitely work. Yes, I think what you can also do is Joel still listening? I mean, the current way this, yeah, I saw it. No, I mean, the way this currently works is, I guess that there is like some certain client used, and then the scale object, and then marshalling happens, right? So I'm not super familiar with this client Go stuff because I'm usually using controller runtime, but you cannot use controller runtime in this thing.
Right.
But I assume there should be a way to construct a patch request with client Go on the right endpoint with essentially, like even if you write the YAML, the JSON by yourself, where you say like, okay, object open, spec, replicas, replica number, that patch should actually work. It's not marshaled from the struct, but it's a patch that should work. Except if they have additional bugs in API. So yeah, if you can basically work around the marshalling problem, I think you can keep using patch. Because I mean, there was a reason why it was a switch to patch, which was to avoid apparently conflicts that were occurring when people were still using update. But also maybe the fix for the other issue, so for the conflict, is maybe to do like a retry on conflict and still keep using update instead of going to patch.
Okay.
I don't know enough about the original issue.
Yeah. Fabrizio.
I think I have a point about testing. Maybe let's Joel speak, which is probably about what you're discussing now.
Yeah, it is. You would be able to, I mean, you could use unstructured with a dynamic client to send a scale resource. That would work quite easily. But yeah, you could also just do your own thing and marshal that and use a dynamic client as well. It's interesting in controller runtime that we do have status sub-resource client, but we don't have other types of sub-resource. Maybe that is an omission.
Isn't there a sub-resource where you, a method where you can basically pass into sub-resource whatever the sub-resource is? I'm just not sure if this is like internally or if this is an exported method.
Yeah, I think there is definitely internally. I don't know if that's exported.
Okay, because I know that the status internally uses that. I also don't know if this was the regular client or the fake client. Or I can take a look.
Okay, Fabrizio, did you still have a comment to add after that?
Yes, Mike. I think that if we look at test coverage, if Autoscaler is going to start cutting beta or alpha release, we can definitely bump it in copy as soon as we have a release with the image and money, whatever we need. That will make, if Autoscaler team cut a preliminary a pre-release, and then ping us. We can bump it, provide a signal, stuff like that, in case.
Yeah, I don't think they do a pre-release currently, but I will take that topic to SIG auto scaling. I've tried in the past, I've talked to them about introducing Cluster API as a test bed for some of this stuff. But I think maybe it's time to revisit that and see if we could do more there. Yeah, there's a good suggestion. Thank you, Fabrizio. I'll definitely take it to SIG auto scaling and see what they have to say. Okay, we only have a couple minutes left, and I want to give Matt a time to talk about the CAP-Z update here. So are we good on the controller stuff, or did you do any final comments you want to add? All right, go ahead, Matt.
There's not much to say, just some patch releases that incorporate the latest patch releases of CAPI. And we fixed something we classified as a bug that means now you don't necessarily have to run, for example, the machine pool controller, which was messing up a certain customer. That's all.
Okay, great. Thank you. And that brings us sliding nicely into the last minute of our meeting here. Great discussions from everybody today. I guess there's not really time for any more ad hoc discussion. So, yeah, thanks for coming out, and I guess we'll see you all next week.